An error occurred. Okay.
Yeah, you're not live.
We're going to try this again. We're live. Hey, house community, and welcome back to House Arrest. You might notice that something's a little bit different with our stream tonight. We've officially moved up in the world, providing you with a better viewing experience of House Arrest. We're excited that now not only do we stream to Facebook Live, but also to our YouTube and our Twitch channels. So if you're looking for more house content, check out those platforms as well. But now back to tonight's show. We've just come out of Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement. It's the day where we ask for forgiveness, where we ourselves forgive, and where our slate is wiped clean for another year. Now, every year without fail, on Erev Yom Kippur, the night before the fast, my phone receives a number of urgent texts from friends with very general and quite unspecific messages like, Adina, please forgive me for anything I've done wrong or any way I've hurt you in the past year. But often these messages that I receive on this particular day every year are from friends who I've slowly lost touch with. If I scroll back in our message history, not far behind is a very near replica of this same message from a year ago. So to me, these I'm sorry messages come across as quite contrived some of the time, especially coming from people who I haven't spoken to frequently throughout the year. It's like we go through our top 100 contacts and send out a blast asking for forgiveness. But is that what forgiveness is? I want to question this notion of forgiveness and acceptance tonight. What does it mean to really forgive beyond just saying the words, I'm sorry, and accepting apologies? Why does the asking and accepting of forgiveness merit an entire day devoted just to that? One of our guests tonight, Alex Rose, pointed me in the direction of a book called The Sunflower by Simon Wiesenthal, who recounts being summoned to the bedside of a Nazi on his deathbed, who seeks a Jew's forgiveness for the wrongs he has done in his life. After the Nazi finishes his story, he asks Wiesenthal for his forgiveness, who leaves the room without saying anything. And the rest of the book is actually Wiesenthal ruminating on whether or not he should have forgiven the man, and other thinkers weighing into this topic as well. But in contrast to this example, we've heard of Holocaust survivors who actually have forgiven the Nazis. I just want to show a short clip to demonstrate this. Hopefully this will work. Just give me a moment. Okay. Oh, no, it doesn't want to, but that's fine because I can just describe it instead. Sad. Anyway, the clip is about a Holocaust survivor who publicly claims her forgiveness to all Nazis for what they did to her and her fellow Jewish people in World War II and in the Holocaust. Another example is Nelson Mandela, who forgave those that jailed him for 27 years opposing apartheid. And the list goes on. But I really want to confront these ideas of forgiveness amongst regular people, Torontonian and New York Jews as well tonight, about holding on and letting go. And so to do that, I've invited a couple of young professionals on house arrest to share ideas and experience. So without further ado, I'm going to bring them on. First, I'd like to welcome Alex Rose. Hey, Alex.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Happy to be back.
Yeah, glad to see you again. You were with us from the start back in March. For those who don't know Alex is a former journalist for the Canadian Jewish News who's now studying cognitive science and psychology at U of T. Next, I'm going to invite on Eliana Rorik. Hey, Eliana.
Whoops, I'm on video.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Eliana is a great friend of mine. She's a 23-year-old living in the heart of New York City, an interesting place to be right now, certainly. Eliana works at Onward Israel as an internship coordinator and is interested in all things food, music, and dark humor coping mechanisms. I'm hoping some of that will come out tonight. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Okay, next in our roster is Antonio Carvalho. Hey, Antonio, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. Thanks for being here. You look great. You got dressed for the
Thanks.
occasion. Antonio is a young professional and philanthropist in the real estate industry. He's currently a member of the Humber River's Rising Philanthropic Leaders. And last but not least, I'm going to ask Ari Pasternak onto the stream. There he is. Hey, Ari.
Hello.
Ari works at a software company. He likes movies, sailing, and improv. So I'm really excited about this group because clearly we all have very different interests, different strengths, and different perspectives. So I think we can just jump right in. I'm going to provide you with a psychological definition of forgiveness and then ask your take on it. So psychologists define forgiveness as a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance toward a person or a group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve your forgiveness. In your opinions, is this description apt? Anyone can jump in.
I know, I guess on an instinct, it sounds like it might be, sure, like sometimes you can just sort of let those things go, but I guess other times, yeah, if you sort of say that, give that apology, right, it can be sometimes difficult to let go of all of the different things sort of nagging at your brain about those. So, I don't know, it sounds very complete.
Yeah, very sort of clinical.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting for a psychological definition to have the word deserve in it also, because that's not really a psychological term or idea, just in terms of, you know, who determines what anyone deserves in that sense.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Yeah, often the question is the forgiveness more for yourself or is it for the other person? That's kind of something I would struggle with too. Is it more for my own self-satisfaction or completing the way I'm feeling, or for the other person?
Right. Forgiveness is definitely a two-way street. Eliana, is there any aspect of this definition that you relate to or that stood out for you?
I think what stood out to me and probably what troubles me is kind of thinking of it in relation to the Jewish idea of tshuva and forgiveness, which is really where you have to up to 3 times ask forgiveness from someone in an almost relentless way. And I find it kind of difficult in terms of thinking of it as in a one way where it's like you forgive someone even if they don't deserve it. And so sometimes some things are there things that can't be forgiven, and are those things, if you forgive the things that can't be forgiven, is that for yourself? And so again, the way that it makes it seem is almost like it is one way. And at least the Jewish idea of it is certainly 2 ways, and that you kind of touched on that, Adina, when you talked about these texts that people send out before Yom Kippur, which tries to make something 2-way, but really, it clearly, if it's that general, it's probably just coming from a place of wanting to check off a list of feeling like you want to be forgiven.
So, Tony, let's go back to your point because I think there's a lot there. In your opinions, is forgiveness for the person who is asking for it or the person who is giving it, right? Those are the two. Being forgiven versus forgiving.
I think it's case by case because, you know, sometimes a person who may have done something wrong, they know they've done something wrong and they've accepted that they need to get past it, but the only way they can get past it is with your forgiveness. So it may not have affected me as much, but the person who has committed the so-called crime or the act needs my forgiveness in order to move on. So I think it really depends on the situation.
And would anyone here say that forgiveness can be an act of mercy, for lack of a better word? You know, you're doing someone a service by forgiving them?
I think you definitely can view it in that way, but I also think it's worth wondering, do we want to put it on the obligation on the person who was harmed to release the person who harmed them of whatever feelings they might have in the aftermath? Like what you just said, Tony, I agree that can be the way it plays out, but I think another thing, when you define forgiveness as conscious and deliberate, then the person who was harmed might feel like it's their obligation to consciously and deliberately forgive the person, but emotionally they may not be ready to. And then you're in a situation where not only has this person done the original harm to someone else, then the person's left who's being hurt by it, who actually kind of has to take on the brunt of the continuing kind of responsibility, even though you would think it should be the other way around.
And I think the key point there is the emotions that come into play, because I think, Ari, you mentioned that the definition of forgiveness seemed too, like, a little bit too complete, a little too perfect, but human emotions and feelings really don't allow for, you know, the act of forgiveness to just happen. Like, there's something comes between us and meaning the words "I'm sorry" or "I accept your apology." Where do you think the place of choice lies in this understanding?
I don't know. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, like, sort of off the Yom Kippur thing, because yeah, you ask them to get up to 3 times for them to forgive you, and if they don't after the 3rd time, they actually have to get forgiveness from you for not forgiving them. So it's interesting, like so what you're saying before about, like, it creates, the victim becomes a victim again, or like becomes the perpetrator in a certain sense in that framework, whereby they have an obligation to provide forgiveness, which is interesting, to be sure. And I don't know if like that has to be like an emotional forgiveness, or you just have to say the words. I don't.
Yeah, so that's what I wonder. Like, saying sorry, like, that's just a word. Those are just words. They don't have to have meaning. When does it become meaningful to say "I am sorry" or "I apologize"? Have any of you had meaningful instances where you have yourself forgiven or asked for forgiveness?
Adding on to that, Adina, I keep thinking about people that are described as an adjective forgiving, like someone that is forgiving, and that we talk about that. What does that mean? Because so many people have different thresholds for pain. And for someone, you might think, "I truly harmed you." Like, you come to them and you feel like you embarrassed them or you lied to them, and they're like, "It's okay. Like, I really moved on and it's fine." And someone else might hold that on forever. On the other hand, like, something that you truly did wrong, you can't even kind of come close to it because it's too hot and it's too complicated. So I don't know. It's very interesting when I think of like a person in my life. Would I describe them as forgiving? Would I describe them as a grudge holder? Like, it becomes these like personalities and personas. And then around Yom Kippur, I think that we start to like question, maybe, do we want to be as fluid with our forgiveness and make it a little bit more meaningful, or do we want to maybe, like, release some of those grudges that we hold on to?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I really wonder when it becomes meaningful, because is forgiveness, is apologizing, is accepting apologies completely subjective? And then how does this idea of asking 3 times sort of play into that? Does anyone have any thoughts? Yeah, same, honestly. I don't know. I want to talk a bit about the role of courage, because I think a big part in asking for forgiveness, in my opinion, in doing it right, is actually coming up with specific points. So, Ari, if I harmed you in a specific way, if I, maybe made a joke at your expense, I would come to you and say, I haven't, not that I know of, I hope. But if I have, I would come to you and say, I'm sorry for making this joke because I know that it was the wrong thing to do. Now, what kind of courage does it take on my part to say that to you, and even on your part to listen to me?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess, like, just, it sort of totally depends on the people. Like, I know people who are totally okay with, like, they commit a faux pas or something like that, and they're on top of it, and they're okay with it, and they're just able to admit that they did something wrong, and everybody feels great after. So, and then other people, it's like pulling teeth for them to just, even if they're aware they did something wrong, you can tell that it just pains them deeply to say, like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have done that, which is, I don't know if it's like I don't know where that comes from.
I actually think that a part of that is pride, actually. And in order to ask for forgiveness genuinely, you might have to actually forgive yourself for what you've done wrong, to build the courage to ask for forgiveness from someone else. Because if you're simply asking for it, it's somewhat of a hollow, I would say it's a hollow request from the person who's asking, because they haven't really forgiven themselves for what they've done wrong. Can
you expand on that a little bit? Like, what do you mean you have to forgive yourself?
So if I'll just give an example. Ari, you're the one to pick on right now. I've said some bad words to Ari, and I know what I've done wrong, and I can accept that I've done that wrong, and I need to forgive myself for being wrong in that sense before asking for forgiveness from the person that I've done the wrong to. If I don't actually feel I've done anything wrong and I've asked Ari for forgiveness, it's somewhat of a hollow request. I'm not genuine in my request.
And I think you're totally right, Tony. And I want to add on too, just the idea of like forgiving yourself. It could also be the case that you know you did something wrong and you don't know how to make it right, and you're just going to hold it against yourself indefinitely. But I think part of forgiving yourself is realizing that, like, yes, I did do something wrong, and no, I can't take it back. There's no way to take it back. I can let the person I hurt know that I know I did something wrong. I think there is value in that, and they can accept it or not accept it as they want. But, you know, after your 3 times or whatever it is, there has to be a point where you're like, I've done what I could to show this person that I'm sorry. I can't just let that define me or my life. I mean, obviously it depends on the scales of forgiveness, but it can't define how I think of myself anymore. I know it's wrong, and I won't make that mistake, or I won't do that thing to someone else again. That's, you know, what I'm going to learn from it. But at a certain point, I mean, you just have to move forward, and it can feel like you can be, you know, feel guilty or shameful, because it's like, you know, they're the ones I hurt. Why am I the one who gets to move forward? Because they're not like I can move past this. They have to carry it with them. But that's, you can't take it back, but you can move yourself forward. And I think sometimes,
I want to urge us to take the conversation away from the sort of these generalities that we're using, like if I hurt Ari's feelings. So I'm just going to go ahead and give a personal example, and hopefully you guys will follow suit. But in the past year or 2, I would say, I've sort of been going through the process of, unfortunately, losing touch with someone who was a very close friend of mine. And I honestly don't have closure over the experience. I'm not even sure why we lost touch, but I was certain that it was because I did something, even though I wasn't sure what that thing was. So I would call and I would text, and I would call and I would text, and I would call and I would text. And it just, nothing was really getting through. We weren't getting anywhere near to where we were in our friendship beforehand, one of my very close friends. And eventually, I remember it was like the day before Passover, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't know what else I can really do to improve this friendship or even to move forward, because typically I'm very pro confronting situations, and sort of like, I always find that when I've done something wrong, or when I feel like someone has wronged me, if we talk about it, it actually makes our relationship stronger on the other side if we make it through. So I sat down on the night before Passover and I wrote a letter to this friend, like a handwritten letter, and I sent it. And honestly, I've never heard back. And like, I don't think the mail system's that slow, right? Back in April, how many months has that been? Like, sometimes on like sad days, I'm like, oh, she must have never received it. But it's interesting, right? Because what else can I do? What is my role now, not only according to asking for forgiveness 3 times, but as a human being with feelings, emotions, and sort of just life experience? I don't want to lose this friend, but in this particular situation, what else can I do?
Nothing. Seems like, I mean, it's not up to you if you lose the friend at that point.
You've right? kind of done your 3 requests for forgiveness.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, that's to go back to Ari's point. Like, that feels so textbook, right? But humans aren't textbooks. Like, I still miss her.
Yeah, I think something that I want to really add into is, like, people say that in a relationship, like, if someone's angry, that's not the worst. The worst is when they feel nothing at all, because when you're angry, you still care. And so I think a lot of what we've been talking about earlier in this conversation is, like, when you're in a back and forth with someone, are they defensive? Do they have pride? But you're fighting. You both care. You're invested. Forgiveness gets really complicated and really, really painful when someone drops out, you know, when they pull the cord and they turn on a binary and they're no longer someone they want to invest in your life. So then it's like you're trying to repair a relationship, but you don't have someone on the other end, and you wonder and you wait and you miss them. And that can be so painful. And I'll share something very personal, and it almost feels easy because I don't know any of you. Well, I know you very well. I'm sure you know.
You're in another country. You can say whatever you want.
So my parents had a really complicated divorce, and my grandmother stopped A lot of my family members, when I moved in with my dad, stopped speaking to me when I was 12 years old. And I'm now 24, and my grandma was dying of cancer and wanted closure after not speaking to me for 11 years. And so during the pandemic, I drove and I got closure with her. She hadn't seen me since I was 12, and now I'm 23 years old.
Wow.
She didn't ask for forgiveness. She was close to being on her deathbed, but she did say that she is so happy that I turned out okay. And then I found out weeks later that she did put me in her will and had left me a generous sum of money. And in that way of leaving me money to pay off my college debt, and she had not she was a very well-off woman. She didn't financially support me at all, and I struggled and took loans to go through school. Now I have money that I'm coming into, but she never said I'm sorry. She never said I'm sorry. It was pride, it was defensiveness, whatever it is. She couldn't in her last moment say I'm sorry. But I think that the apology in itself was seeing me, and for her, and the way, and that's something to analyze for some people, it was leaving me money. So here I am, she just passed away 2 weeks ago, right in the Jewish holidays when it's like we're thinking about, who will be marked into the book of life. And I'm mourning someone I have a lot of early childhood memories with. And I saw her again, and then she passed away. And she didn't say I'm sorry, but I still feel, going back to that original thing of like you can give forgiveness even when someone doesn't say I'm sorry. I feel that she went in peace because she saw me, and so I think she was sorry. And I do give forgiveness, and I do feel closure.
So you take her like tangible sort of interaction with you, seeing her, asking to be seen with you, and sort of what she left you as an apology, and you accept that? Like, does an apology for you have to include the words I'm sorry? It sounds like not.
Yeah. And it drives me crazy because I just it's like, how hard can it be? It isn't the hard part getting yourself to see me, leaving me that money. You couldn't have just managed to say I'm sorry that, I let family drama get in the way, and that I left you as a child and left you financially, by yourself and all of that. But no, I think that people have their limitations. And I think that in order for her to say I'm sorry, she would have gotten defensive and saying, well, I'm not perfect, and I tried my best, and I lived and I tried, and there's this like feeling, just like you were saying, pulling teeth, right? We were just saying, like, so for some people when they apologize, it's so hard because they get so defensive, and it's like, well, you've made mistakes too. And it's like there's sometimes that pain where it's like that self-hatred where it's like if you admit you did something wrong, then in some ways you're like revealing that you have ugly parts of yourself, and am I lovable? And it's like it just gets too complicated. And I think that it really taught me a lesson about like the power of saying I'm sorry. And you can show forgiveness in a lot of ways, just like you can show a love in a lot of ways. But I think any child that had a parent that didn't say I love you to them will say, even if my parent showed me love in other ways, I still wish they would have said it,
So interesting.
And words have power, and I wish she would have said it.
Have any of you?
Yeah, go ahead. No, take it away.
Sure. I'm wondering, it's like, because with all these like ideas of people just like sort of being unable to even say those words, like, it's funny because on the other end, we never feel what we know that they're feeling. We never feel it's like, oh yeah, no, that's so silly of them to apologize, or like that's a weak thing for them to do. Like nobody ever thinks that. So like, it's almost like
when you're on the receiving end of an apology.
Yeah, on the receiving end, we never think the things of the people apologizing that seem to be the things that they're thinking of themselves that's holding them back. So like
these complexes of like, it's if I apologize, it means I'm weak.
Sure, yeah, or whatever it might be, yeah. Or that like I'm admitting that like I'm not perfect, like that I have these flaws and stuff, and like, yeah, I don't know, like I personally have never had that where somebody's apologized to me and I've thought, aha, they're admitting that they are a broken person. Yeah.
Have any of you been in the position where you haven't wanted to immediately accept someone's apology?
I think there's been cases where somebody will apologize it and it does seem sincere and everything like that, but based on history, I just know I'm going to be in there at the same spot in 6 months. So it's like, okay, I see that you're being sincere and stuff like that, but like it's.
Yeah, is it really sincere if you're not going to put the work in to make a difference in a way that would give meaning to it? Because how much is an apology worth if it's you're apologizing for the same thing time after time and not willing to actually make any of the changes that would give weight to your apology.
I feel called out.
Well, I just think that's kind of what like the point of an apology is. I mean, between people who know each other well, it's a way of saying like, I did this and I know it was wrong for me to do this, as a way of saying like, this isn't how things should be between us, and I'm the one who did the wrong thing, and I'll be the one to make sure I don't do that wrong thing again.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're gonna say, I know that this is wrong of me and our relationship shouldn't be like this, but I actually don't care enough about it to put the work in to ensure I don't do this wrong thing again, then, I mean, you know, if it happens over and over, then it's like you were just saying, Ari, how much does that apology really mean? How much do you want to accept it if they're not going to put any actions behind their words?
Maybe accept it's almost like at that point you're just emotionally not invested anymore.
Yeah.
It becomes like a thing. It's that like, okay, sure, like, but it's almost like there's no point to it really.
So I want to go back to something, Eliana, I think you mentioned right at the beginning, is actually the word tshuva, which is the word we use like, it means repentance in Hebrew, but the literal translation means return. And I just wonder, like, if we can tease out that definition a little bit, or that etymology, like where does the concept of return come in to conversations on apologizing and forgiveness?
I think it's more of a return to how things were before whatever, whether it's a confrontation or lack of being there for someone. It's a return to where things were before, when things were good.
So in asking for forgiveness, you are looking to return to the like state of the relationship before you had something to ask forgiveness for.
Absolutely. That's how I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we think about forgiveness and apologizing, we kind of need a theory of like ourselves to understand why it's so powerful, you know, why it hurts us so much when someone wrongs us, and why it's so powerful when they're the ones to say I was the one in the wrong. And I think it's like you were just saying, that it's this idea of returning to how things were before and returning to kind of our understanding of the world before, that things are supposed to go a certain way. If you treat someone this way, they'll treat you this way. And then all of a sudden they do this thing to you. And it's like, it's almost like being able to return to your relationship with them and being able to return to understanding of yourself and people in general. Like if I'm kind and honest and open, then things will play out this way, and it's returning to that understanding that was kind of taken away from you when things didn't play out the way they were supposed to, and you have to doubt everything you thought you knew before. Which kind of, you know, returning to a place where you can't accept that, and like, I wasn't wrong, but this person was, and they admitted it.
Something that I like about the word return, now that I'm just thinking about it, is it's actually like a bit of a repetitious word, because obviously means like again, and turning is sort of like turning, right? Circular. And that kind of potentially, this could be far-fetched, you could call me out for this, but like that kind of relates to this idea of forgiveness, because I don't think anyone in life has lived a life where they haven't had or shouldn't, haven't had the need to ask for forgiveness, or haven't had the opportunity to accept one's forgiveness. So it's not like you ask once and you're good. Like Alex, you were saying, even saying you're sorry for something isn't enough. You have to prove it in the next turn or the next cycle of your actions, like that you're actually sorry and that you won't do the thing that you're apologizing for again. So yeah, there's me.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I just want to do a little thought experiment with all of you for a minute before we say goodnight. I want you to, and this can be private or preferably shared, of course, but just take a minute to think of something that someone has done to you in the past year that has left you feeling wronged. It could be something as small as, missing a coffee date, or not calling you on your birthday, or something as big as letting you down in a more important sense. So just as you're thinking of that person, that experience, that moment, I want you to try and acknowledge your feelings, your physiological experience of thinking about it. Is your face warming? Are your fists sort of clenched, or your jaw? Is your heart sort of beating a little bit faster? Anything like that?
I know that feeling you mean. It's not really happening right now, but it's just when like you get the kind of tunnel vision on like, how could this person do this? Don't they know? Like, yeah, I don't know. I've started to let myself, instead of trying to stop them cold, to just let it go through the motions. And I find when I give them space, they actually have a lot less control over me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So I was doing a little bit of research on this, and apparently it helps if you take a minute to define those feelings. So, recognize that, your fists are clenched, or, all of a sudden you don't see anything else around you, that sort of tunnel vision, and recognize the strength of those feelings and project what it may feel like to just talk about the issue that's causing these strong emotions with the person who wronged you. So if you could take a minute, even just hypothetically, what do you think those feelings would be transformed into in, let's say, having a civil conversation with someone? It could be from past experience, like confronting someone when you feel like they've done something wrong. Like, you want another personal Adina example? A couple of years ago, it was Erev Yom Kippur, and I felt like I really needed to apologize to a friend of mine for the way that I had treated her. So I remember I called her on the steps of my university's library, and it was like a cold September afternoon, and I just started crying immediately on the phone. And then she started crying immediately on the phone, and it was this sort of like built up tension and sort of sadness and just like all of these feelings that we had been feeling together but separately, right? And all of a sudden we were feeling them together, but in this sort of cathartic way where like I said what I had to say, she said what we had to say, and like I mentioned before, our friendship strength became stronger from that. Have any of you had similar experiences? Crying on your university library?
I think almost universally, yeah, like it's whenever those times sort of come up where like, yeah, somebody does something, like the bringing it up is almost, I've never regretted that. And like, it is amazing. It's that, yeah, because like those feelings you're describing, yeah, like that tunnel vision, the clenched fist and stuff, like those will come up basically all the time. And then you actually just talk about it. And that is the most cathartic thing and stuff. And because 9 times out of 10, nobody's ever trying to make you feel that way. So it's the actual conversation ends up being very healing, and it is a shame that we often err on the side of just avoiding the conversation.
Right. Yeah. So what do you all think about committing to confronting someone who has done something or who you feel like you need to just air it out with as a response to this episode and this conversation, and checking in with us to see how the feelings sort of resolve? Should we all do that?
We're going to invite them on the air and like dish
exactly.
It out.
We're going to do it live, and I'm just going to cry tears. So that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for being a part of this and sharing vulnerable stories and personal opinions and different perspectives. I think it's a really meaningful conversation, especially because now that Yom Kippur is over, it's easy for many of us to feel like, we have a whole year till we have to go through those awful conversations again. But really, I think what we all agreed on is this idea of tshuva, or returning, is that it's like a continuous cycle. So thank you so much for being here. On Thursday night, we're having a workshop on having difficult conversations and embracing the discomfort they elicit with educator Michael Soberman. Spots are filling up fast, so make sure to sign up for that. Thank you so much. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.